Hello, everybody, and welcome to Economics Monday with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your host for today. And today we have a very exciting topic we're going to discuss, which is the Biden report card. Since we're ending about 6 months into the year, the Biden economic report card is going to be very important to see how he's performed in all these different metrics. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker for today. He actually is a former associate dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law. He also is a on the South Dakota Trust Company, very well versed at JDLLM, very well versed in the area of economics. Let's bring in Dr. Dan Worthington. Dr. Dan Worthington, welcome to the show.
Hey,
Good to have you here. And today we're going to be looking at something very important, which is that, and David M. Walker is going to be joining us shortly, is Joe Biden's economic report card. So, can you give us a little bit of your thoughts on Joe Biden's economic report card? What do you see his administration doing?
not a whole lot, but damage. I mean, it's a tough job being president, unless you're, shoved in front of a teleprompter and having your speeches written for you. I feel sorry for Joe Biden because of his age and his inability really to function fully. Um, but that's no excuse for putting the American economy in the in the toilet. Like I said, I don't think they could have done anything. If they were trying to destroy the economy, they couldn't have done anything any different, I don't think. You look at, we were totally independent of foreign gas
Mhm.
before he arrived on scene. Uh, our employment numbers, uh, less COVID, were looking better. Uh, I think Trump had put everything from the standpoint of the economy into a growth phase and had done a lot of things, hundreds of things, in a very positive way to stimulate the economy and to make sure jobs were given to all Americans, including those who are most disadvantaged. I think from that standpoint, I see a lot of people suffering. The price of gas has nearly doubled. In some areas, it's more than doubled, and that is a tax on the American people. And he's not taking any responsibility for it. He's trying to blame everybody but himself, and that's just poor leadership, poor, uh, poor stewardship. I just think that uh, Joe Biden is really been a disappointment to the American people.
Mhm.
A change definitely needs to be made. Looks like one may be on the way uh, because of the change in parties and that kind of thing in power. But
Mhm.
it's really, really a sad state of affairs when all the Democrats could do is field him as president, and
Mhm.
then the second in charge isn't exactly Posey's, right? She's not very bright, not very capable, and then the third is evil. So you have a really difficult situation right now in our country. So even the Republicans who are gain power in the House of Representatives and are able to impeach this guy because he's not competent. Then there's Harris, and then what do you do with her? And then there's Pelosi, and what do you do with her?
Mhm.
So it's a real mess. I think Pelosi's running on the off chance that she'll get to be president.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of his foreign policies. Excuse me, his domestic economic policy. And this one is a number that I don't like very much. GDP is down 1.4%. That's
Oh,
the
I know.
gross domestic product of what the United States is actually producing went down. Now, I recall when Trump was in office, he says, well, we're going to push it over 3%. In other words, his game plan was to expand the economy, produce the GDP over 3%, which is
Yep.
really tough to do in the United States. Now, China hits around, their target's around 8%, much bigger than the United States. But if you're not producing more goods and services, you're going behind. In other words, you're falling behind the rest of the the world, basically. Down 1.4% is not a good number. So,
No.
in other words, so the thing is, the first thing I looked on the report card, if you saw somebody came in and said, well, we're producing less goods and services. And the United States has moved toward more of a service economy. We outsourced most of our manufacturing, which I think is really bad because we're heavily dependent on China and other countries for supply of our manufacturing. What can we do to turn this around, Dr. Dan? This is not a good number.
Well, I think what Trump did to change the trajectory of GDP was he immediately got rid of many regulations that were uh, counterproductive and costly to companies and were a disincentive for them to produce, right? And so that's one thing that has to happen is sensible deregulation.
Right.
Um, the other thing that's really, really hurting us is, again, dependence on foreign oil. And the price of gas drags the economy down tremendously because it
Mhm.
raises the prices of goods. It forces everyone into positions to rethink because the great logistical systems in the United States right now are the truckers, right?
Mhm.
And diesel's incredibly high. I mean, it's ridiculously high, and it's the easiest to produce. I mean, there's hardly anything they have to do to it. It doesn't make any sense that it's higher except the demand for it. And so that makes it very, very difficult for them. All the regulations that they've had to face that have slowed things down in the ports and slowed things down in trucking, all deliberate choices by Democratic leaders at ports and other places to create havoc and to create problems for our domestic production, domestic delivery systems, and all the things that go along with it. It's real telling when you see that this has been done deliberately and
Mhm.
this has been done in the name of COVID or in the name of governmental regulation or but it's very harmful to not only our economy but to the American people, and the hardworking American people need to work and make and earn money and pay their bills and that kind of thing. All the doles that have been given out have done nothing but inflame the fire of inflation and make it more difficult and really created a more unsustainable situation. Now we're seeing interest rates go up, which they have to. The Fed has been artificially keeping the interest rates down for a while, and now they have no choice but to raise interest rates. But guess who that hurts the most?
For
The,
people,
the consumer. Yeah,
right?
and so yeah, no. So what's happening is the federal government is taxing the American people at an unprecedented rate when you add everything up. It's hurting us uh, foreign and domestically. And when the United States aches, the rest of the world does too. And this will all be because of poor governmental policies and stupid decisions that people have made, thinking they had the ability or mandate to change things. They didn't. No,
Mhm.
but half of the American people or more, depending on how you count things, didn't want this and didn't want him. And he's really creating a, an untenable situation in the United States. And it goes down to this. I think David will agree with me. It's leadership,
Mhm.
lack of vision. And I think that because he's owned by the Chinese and other interests with his family cabal, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing what you're seeing is the pay to play. And Democrats are really big on pay to play, both in terms of insider trading and everything else. I imagine the Republicans are too, just that they can get away with it.
Yeah.
But it's really setting up a bad example for our government, their integrity, and the ability of government to govern effectively, because nobody's believing these clowns anymore because they are corrupt. And and corruption is going at every level in our government. Everything from law enforcement to the uh, security agencies and everywhere
Mhm.
because of the trying to push agendas that are unlawful and harmful to the American people. But for what reason? There has to be some sort of agenda. And I've said this before. All you have to do is go on the website of the Council on Foreign Relations and read to know what they're up to. And
Yeah.
you just go and you read it. This is their agenda. This is their plan. This is where they're pushing us. All the major media moguls are members of the Council of Foreign Relations. They're tied directly in with our security infrastructure, and they really call the shots. It isn't
Yeah.
Congress or the president.
Yeah. Actually, Dr. Dan, if you're in Salt Lake City, I'm going to be in your city tomorrow and for the rest of the week. So if you
Oh,
have
that's
time to
great.
get
I'm
together.
actually coming to your seminar.
Oh, you are? Okay. I was going to say, if you have time for lunch or dinner, I'd like to get together. But here's the reason why I wanted to talk about the Biden report card. This was brought to me by one of our viewers, which now the Pod TV network has 50,000 viewers on the Roku Vimeo channel, which I get the data all the time, which I was quite impressed because we grew. I think we started like 15,000, but it's been growing. So now we got a nice viewer base, but not really what I'm looking for. When I get to 500,000, I'll let everybody know. 50,000 is okay, but
You'll get
500,000.
there. You'll get there.
Yeah, but one of the viewers was pointing out this interesting statistic. This year so far, $7 trillion was lost in the stock market. In other words, our market's down around 16% this year. I haven't checked today's number. But here's the interesting stat on this. The market has lost more money than the dot-com bust of 2000 and the recession of 2008 combined.
Doesn't surprise me.
Okay. Why are we in a full-fledged recession, Dr. Dan? When you lose 7 trillion, not billion, 7 trillion goes off the market in a very short period of time, why aren't we in recession, Dr. Dan?
I think we're approaching it. I think the market is bigger than it was in the 2000 .com bubble.
Yeah.
And so even though we've lost that much, proportionally, it isn't as much as then when you look at the percentage wise. But it sure is portent of difficult times ahead if we don't straighten out our leadership problem.
Yeah. Well, I just think this is a significant amount of money coming off the market in a very short period of time.
The socialists think that there's plenty in America to go around. And this is why they're doing this, is to tax everybody so they can give it out to redistribute wealth, right? But what we've proven is there isn't.
Right.
There isn't. And
yeah, you're limited resources.
The borders, what's the strategy on the border? It's stupid. I mean, even the Hispanics don't want the illegals to come in and take their jobs. It's insane what Biden is allowing to happen on the borders. And it's all driven by the international organizations and the NGOs. They're going down there, funding the people and encouraging them to come and storm our border. And those are mainly funded by, guess who? George Soros, right? And his cabal. I mean, this is basically this whole thing. Many of the bad things that are happening are because of the policies, not of the president of the United States, not of the Democratic Party, although they've been sucked in and been bought. It's because George Soros is trying to destroy our country, and he's never made any qualms about it. That's what his goal is, and this is why he's doing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. So immigration. What is and this is a problem that we've had. What is the Biden plan for immigration? Does he have?
Yeah, I don't think so. Other than to let more people in, and to ship them all around the different parts of the United States and strategically place them for whatever purpose.
Mm-hmm. So he really has no immigration plan, and this is important because this is.
No, I think he has an immigration plan, as I mentioned, because strategically positioning them around the country. There's a reason for what he's doing. I just don't know what it is.
All right. Okay. And now
it's probably not him.
Yeah, I don't think so. This is very, very important that David Walker points out. What is the United States economic plan today and for the next 5 years?
We don't have one.
Okay.
I think the closest thing we've had, I think Trump had one.
Yeah, I heard his plan. His plan was actually to achieve GDP over 3%,
Yeah,
which
Trump
is
Trump had a
which
plan
is
and he was working his plan. That's what he was doing. And then this COVID thing,
right.
set off by the Chinese deliberately,
Yeah.
because the, there's suddenly an influx of lots of tourists in the United States from China in the major cities of the United States. And
Hmm.
guess what they had when they came?
COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
so you have to suspect, well, maybe this is something that they did on purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what do I know?
Okay. But how can a country that's as large and powerful, the world's largest economy to date, as the United States, not have an economic plan? How do we do that?
And they need an economic plan. That's the point. And as I mentioned before, Trump had one. This
Right.
this guy doesn't.
Hmm.
He has a destructive uh, policies that are set on destroying the economy. I don't understand what his point is, unless it has to do with the international bankers and them making more money, and them helping them drive it so they can.
Hmm.
That's got to be the reason. Look at all the former presidents and how cushy they retired, all except Trump. From all the speaking engagements and the payola and the charitable contributions and the other things that happened. It's a pay to play. If you get to be president of the United States, you play the game, you do your part, you're a good boy, you do what you're told, and then you retire in with your Secret Service detail and come in comfort and luxury the rest of your life.
Hmm.
That's the plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So he'll retire in luxury for the rest of his life, no matter what happens. But in the meantime, can't he get a council of economic advisors or get a group of people together to actually create a short term and a long term economic plan for the United States of
He's
America
not interested in doing that, Nick. I
and
mean, why?
addressing something we've addressed on this show, which doesn't, the media doesn't address, which bothers me and should bother you, and that's our friendly Medicare going bust in 2026, I think it is.
Yeah, I know. They're too focused on the Green New Deal and the rights for those who suffer from transgender situations and others. They're too focused on minority issues to be focused on the major issues that face the American families everywhere, every day.
Yeah,
And it's all a distraction from the major issues. And then they don't want to take any responsibility for everything going kaput.
yeah, but the thing is, these two issues, the way I see it, are definitely going to hit. In other words,
Yeah.
actuarially, you can correct things if you address them earlier. It's just like retirement. If somebody wants to plan for the retirement, you do it at age 30, gives you a 35-year horizon to accumulate the compounding interest of money. If you want to solve Social Security going broke in 2034, you need to do that no later than 2024 to make sure that the Social Security Trust Fund is solvent. Right now, it's like this: there's no plan, and the problem I have, Dan, the media is not addressing this issue at all. In other words, media and the politicians.
Well,
Politicians locally
yeah,
here are running on guns, immigration, and abortion. That's it.
yeah.
Okay, Social Security going broke in 2034? Nope. Economic plan? Nope. So why is it that the media and the politicians do not address what I think is a very crucial issue that in the next 10 years, Social Security is going to be
Well, let me ask you this question, Nick. Who controls the media?
five corporations in the United States right now.
Right. And what do they belong to?
Various parties, by the way. They're very
Council.
heavily influenced by either the Democratic or Republican Party.
Well, Council on Foreign Relations
Yeah.
and their policies, right?
Hmm.
So why does media deliberately lie to the American people and have for the last I don't even know the number.
I,
They've
they
always
will.
been okay. So the American media has always either been a propaganda tool for the United States government, or it's always been a tool for some sort of social engineering,
Mhm.
or some other thing. I mean, they don't they're not really reporting the news or anything else. They're trying to shape society, and that's what they're there for. And that's what the major corporations are trying to do. I think it's fairly obvious. A lot of the American people don't understand that, and
Mhm.
they're just not well informed. And I think our friend, uh, your Pulitzer Prize winner, may
David
not
Johnson.
may not agree with me,
Yeah.
but that's a fact. It's the truth. It's you can just see it. It's plain,
Yeah.
you know, and uh, and so that's why the media is not reporting what's really happening, and they're focusing on the same issues, the same ridiculous issues that
Mhm.
the Democrats are having them focus on. The thing about Trump that was funny is he tried to control the media cycle by being so ridiculous.
Right.
So,
Right.
so he would do all these things and get the media all outraged about it, but he did it on purpose to keep the media focused on that rather than the other stuff that they try to focus on all the time. He was
Mhm.
always on the attack with the liberals just to keep them in disarray. You're too busy.
Mhm.
It's the funniest thing in the world, but it was also sad because it was not done with grace and political
Savvy. Yeah.
savvy. Yeah.
He did have some issues with the media, but the thing is, I believe he would have actually brought up this issue. But when I'm listening to the elections that are going around the United States right now, it's mainly I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal. I am for abortion. I'm against abortion. I'm for immigration, against immigration, gun rights, and then that's it. The hard economic plan that David Walker has recommended is off the table. In other words, as you said, and we've seen, there is no economic plan.
No, there
China
isn't.
has an economic plan. They have a Belt and Road Initiative, and I never heard of it because the media didn't tell me anything about it until David Walker started talking about it. Then
Yeah.
I started seeing that yes, China has this Belt and Road Initiative to basically infiltrate all these countries around the world and take them over through using their economic power. The United States doesn't have any plan at all, and this is very bothersome. And it seems to me your leader Joe Biden doesn't even announce. Here's our economic plan for this year. Here's our plan for the next 5 years.
Well, the reason the reason that is the foreign powers want us to infight and and not focus on important issues.
Yeah.
Uh, they want to distract us and keep us from focusing on things that are important.
Mhm.
Uh, our politicians really want to do that too. I mean, in the big scheme of things, most of these issues that they're running on aren't that big of a deal in comparison to the real issues.
Right.
And so that is the problem. Roe's been with us for how many years? Don't even
50 years,
count it.
1973.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so whether the Supreme Court tweaks it a little bit and makes it so the states have the ability to govern this area, that'll still be litigated. You know that
Right.
because it's really not that big of a deal. It's not like a woman won't be able to get an abortion after this Supreme Court decision comes down. If they need to get one, they'll get one. They've been getting them for hundreds of years without having a law in the books that said they can or
Mhm.
can't.
Yeah.
And so you know, it was an issue meant to distract. The
Yeah.
leak was timed specifically for it was part of their strategy. They're like Democrats' uh, election strategy to release this and create a furor over it because
Mhm.
they really haven't got anything else to run on, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they did it. It's an affront to the Supreme Court of the United States that this happened. Whoever was responsible and whichever justice was behind it should be impeached,
Mhm.
in my mind, because this was a great affront on the Supreme Court, and I think that it's incredibly wrong.
Mhm. Yeah, the leak was incredibly wrong, but the thing is, the decision, because I did go review Alito's draft. Remember, the decision hasn't formally been announced. Does in certain senses it actually makes some certain sense. In
Yeah,
other words, what they're doing, they're not outlawing abortions. Okay, What they're
Right.
doing, from what I understand, is moving the abortions to the states to make that determination, or the federal government. And we're going to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker. We're going to talk about economics, David, but we just had to bring up Roe versus Wade since it's sitting on everybody's plate. And near your city, I won't say you're in Washington anymore because you're outside of Washington, which is good, that there was apparently a leak of this draft that Alito put out to everybody. But it really doesn't say you can't have an abortion. The media's turned this around like you can't have an abortion. From what I understand, it says we're going to delegate it to the states or even the federal government to make their own laws regarding abortion. We're not going to legislate from the bench. In that respects, doesn't that decision make sense? Because they're right, and the Constitution doesn't really address that. We can get to the economics issues in a moment, but I don't know if you have any thoughts, David, on the Roe
Well,
case.
what the draft opinion says, and again, you have to underline that it is a draft, okay, and it's subject to change, and it could change in its content, it could change in the degree of support that it has, right? So, but based upon the current draft, what it says is that this is an issue that ought to be decided by the states. And that would mean that it doesn't, quote unquote, ban abortions, but it means that you have to look at it on a state by state basis. Now, if you do that, you'll find that about half the states will want to have very, very restrictive access to abortions. And then a number of other states will have very generous aspects, access to abortions. What the progressives want is they want very generous access to abortions throughout the entire country, and they don't want there to be any differences by state. All right. So basically, the big government people want more federal government control and more federal government power, right? And that's what this is all about. So now there are a number of states. I think there's about 13 states that if Roe v. Wade is struck down, by that I mean the federal government is not setting the rules, that it goes back to the states, that they automatically go back to banning abortions either in total or severe restrictions. And so then all the action is going to end up being at the state level. Look, here's part of the conundrum here. There's a difference between morality and the law. All right. The primary argument that's being made right now is, should this be a state's issue or should it be a federal issue? Based on the draft, they would send it back to the states, which would mean it'd be a state by state determination. The second issue is the moral issue. All right. I mean, I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm not for abortion, okay, except in rape, incest, or the life of the mother. All right. At the same point in time, when you look at the Mississippi case is not extreme. What it does is it recognizes that due to advances in science, the point of viability has changed over time as compared to where it was in Roe 50 years ago.
Right.
So one of the other possibilities might be that the justices reach a compromise and say, okay, we're not going to strike it down in total, but we're going to change the point in time in which viability is deemed to occur. And to be more like, 15 weeks, which is Mississippi, or 18 weeks or whatever. And it's interesting when you end up comparing our laws to other countries, because, our laws are more generous than most of Europe, which is supposed to be a lot more progressive than we are, but that's a different issue.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, looking at just from a legal standpoint, it does seem to me that if the decision is it's legislative, not judicial, that was actually the correct decision to make. In other words, it's up to the government to make the rules regarding this particular issue, because it certainly is not in the Constitution of the United States.
And that's basically what the draft says. The draft says is that Roe v. Wade exceeded its authority because this is not a constitutional issue. And therefore, it ought to be decided by the legislative bodies. Right. And in the absence of federal action or in the absence of an express federal role, then that means it gets decided by the states. Because as you know,
Mhm.
The Constitution basically says that the only rights that exist at the federal level are the ones that are ascribed to the federal government. And if it's not
Right.
ascribed to the federal government, then it belongs to the states and or the people.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, to me, it does make some sense. Now, the reason we're going to discuss the Joe Biden economic report card is we're halfway through the year, and this was brought to me by one of our viewers. Which now, since we have our own channel on Roku, even though officially it goes up June the 1st, it's actually running right now if you're on Roku right now, and we have 50,000 viewers. I was going. One of the viewers came up with this, and they sent this to me. In the last, since the beginning of the year, the stock market has lost 7 trillion in value, which today trillion is just another number. But here's what they pointed out. The 7 trillion exceeds the entire loss of the 2008 crisis and the dot-com boom of the year 2000 combined. In other words, 7 trillion is a big number. So, David, when I'm looking at the Joe Biden economic report card, how can we give them, at least relating to the stock market, a good grade when the stock market has lost 7 trillion in value? So many of our readers are watching their 401ks become 201ks once again.
Well, first, I think we have to understand that you're dealing with nominal dollars there. And so it might be technically accurate, but I don't think it's a fair way to look at it. I think you have to look at it as a percentage of market value. And I remember to this day that I was confirmed as Assistant Secretary of Labor for ERISA, for pensions and health, which you know about.
Yeah, the EBSA, right.
All right. On the day of the big crash in 1987. And
Mm-hmm.
I used to kid saying, well, immediately after I was confirmed later that afternoon, the market solidified and started going back up, having nothing to do with me, but it was a good
You
time.
can take the credit for it.
So no, I didn't take credit. I just, it was technically accurate, but obviously misleading. All right. So my point is, look, I don't think you can give President Biden a good rating on the economy, and 75% plus of Americans are not giving President Biden a good rating on the economy. I mean, if we had some good growth last year, but a lot of that growth last year was just a bounce back from COVID. It wasn't because they were new jobs. We were recovering jobs that we already had. Okay. Secondly, if you look now in the first quarter of this year, we had 1.4% negative economic growth. All right. If you look at inflation was 8.5% last month. It's 8.3%. I'm sorry, 8.5% through March, 8.3% through April. That's obviously a very bad number. Yes, real wages are going up, but they're underwater. Pardon me, wage growth is going up, but real wages, net of inflation, are going down. Okay. Yes, we have, we have a record amount of job openings. All right. At the same point in time, we have a huge skills gap between what we need and what we have, and the labor participation rate is going down. Okay, and yes, the stock market has gone down this year. It's lost a tremendous amount of value, and I think it's also important that we keep in mind the stock market is really looking at what do they expect to happen over the 6 to 9 months. So the fact that the stock market is going down doesn't give you a whole lot of comfort, with regard to the future, because they're basically saying this is what we think is going to happen over the next 6 to 9 months. So I think, if I had to rate the economic performance of the current administration, I would give it a gentleman D. In certain categories, I'd give them an F. In certain categories, I give them a D. On energy policy, for example, it's an F. On inflation, it's an F. Okay. But in fairness, it's not just the administration. I think the Federal Reserve has been a big part of the problem. The Federal Reserve has aided and abetted fiscal irresponsibility. It's kept interest rates too low for too long, especially when we started having stronger economic growth through the recovery. It's been self-dealing in U.S. debt, for too long. It basically enabled the modern monetary theorists, which are, I think, just downright dangerous, if you will. And now we're all paying a price as a result of it.
Okay. The other issue that I'd like to address, and I know we address it many times on this show, but as I watch major media, they don't address it. By the way, I did like the fact that we have 50,000 views, and CNN Plus only had 10,000, and they went out of business. I don't know if you know that already.
Well, and the answer is we didn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars.
They actually spent $300 million on CNN Plus, and then they're out the door. But anyway,
well, you know what CNN stands for, right? The Constantly Negative Network, but that's okay. We'll go. But only with regard to things they don't like. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This thing always bothers me, David. I'm sorry. Medicare insolvent in 2026. When I was listening to the media today, they talked about the shootings in Buffalo. Okay. And it was all race and hate. No one mentioned mental illness, which this person is obviously mentally ill. And the thing is, it's like mental illness is always taken off the table. Okay. When it comes to the economy, Medicare insolvent in 2026. It's brought up on your show, but not on any other show. I'm going like, why is it that we will not address the Medicare insolvency issue in 2026? Why are we scared of this?
Look, the biggest deficit America has is a leadership deficit. We are very myopic, very short-sighted, okay? Our political system at the present point in time is such that absent extraordinary presidential leadership, which we clearly don't have, and quite frankly, with regard to fiscal issues, we haven't had. The last time we had extraordinary presidential leadership on fiscal issues was Bill Clinton, okay? And George H.W. Bush, 41, demonstrated some leadership as well, although paid a price for it. If you don't have extraordinary presidential leadership, then the system is such that they don't want to have to make tough choices until they're forced to make tough choices. And they will be forced to make tough choices with regard to Medicare and with regard to Social Security, because when the so-called trust funds, and I put quotes around that, they're trust the government funds. They're not real trust funds. They're not separate and distinct legal entities. They don't have fiduciary responsibility and liability. They don't have liquid assets in them. All they have is IOUs, okay? But in fairness, those IOUs are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. So, they'll be forced to act when the so-called trust fund goes to zero, because under current law, you can only pay benefits out of, or payments out of, the trust fund. And so in 2026, which by the way, may well be earlier than 2026 when the new trustees reports come out, they should be coming out anytime now, all right? Then they're going to have to make up the gap. And they're either going to have to raise premiums or they're going to have to cut payments to providers. The equivalent of that on the Social Security side is 2033, 2034, which is also likely to accelerate, in part because of the inflation that we're experiencing now, because keep in mind that Social Security benefits are indexed, okay? When those trust funds, combined trust funds, go to zero, then you have to cut benefits 20 to 25%. That is politically unacceptable. That is not going to happen. The biggest frustration that I have is when you have a large, known, and growing problem, meaning it gets worse with the passage of time, it's prudent to solve it sooner rather than later so you can avoid a crisis, so people can plan, so you don't have to make as big a changes, so you can phase in those changes over a period of time. But just as was the case in 1983, the last time we did Social Security reform, absent extraordinary presidential leadership, they're probably going to wait until near the last minute.
Yeah, but actuarially it doesn't make sense. It's, in other words, like saying that I want to fund for my retirement at age 65, and you're age 30, it makes sense because you fund over a long period of time. You have 35 years to fund your retirement. If you wait till age 64 and say, I'm going to fund my retirement at age 65, frankly, David, it's too late. I mean, it's just the actual numbers
Well,
make sense.
yeah, and as you know, it's a social insurance program, and it's an open group social insurance program.
Right.
Okay, and the biggest challenge that we have is demographics.
Mhm.
You know, when I was born in 1951, there were 16 people paying into Social Security for every person drawing benefits. Today, it's about 3 to 1. It's going to go down to 2 to 1 within the next 10 years. All right, and then healthcare cost. And healthcare costs are about 20% of the economy, and they're growing, faster than the economies. People are living longer. You tend to have more healthcare costs for people who are or elderly because they have more underlying health conditions. Okay, and so those are facts, and we have to recognize reality. The last time that we reformed Social Security, we didn't consider demographic facts. And we basically tried to balance the numbers on average over 75 years without recognizing that meant we were going to have surpluses in the early years and we were going to have large and growing deficits in the outer years. This time, what we have to do when we reform these programs, we have to consider demographics and rising healthcare costs. And we have to consider not just what the average is, we have to consider what do we need to do to make it solvent, sustainable, secure over 75 years, and at the end of the 75-year period. In other words, what are the demographics and what are the conditions look like at the end of the 75 years, such that we have reasonable assurance that we're going to be okay beyond that horizon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another issue that comes up even as early as yesterday, there was somebody that was reporting student debt, went to not University of Pennsylvania, but Penn State, and accumulated $280,000 in student loans.
What kind of degree, or did they get a degree?
Never said that. What sort of degree?
Yeah, they might not have gotten one, or if they did, it may not even be marketable. But
$280,000, in my humble opinion, is a lot of money for student loan, for basically an intangible asset, which is basically, a college degree. What is being done, or does the administration have any plan to reduce or stop this bleeding of our young people in America with the student debt for college education? David, do you know anything that they're doing?
Well, actually, the federal government has actually fueled the increases cost of college, because to the extent that you're providing easy money, then there is not adequate checks and balances on increases in the cost of tuition, in the cost of room and board, et cetera. Let me just say, whoever borrowed $280,000 for a degree from Penn State obviously had a good time doing a bunch of other things, because there's no way in hell it cost $280,000 for a 4-year degree from Penn State. Okay, even fully loaded. All right,
unless they're out of state tuition, you move from another state.
I still don't think you get there.
Have to do it. Yeah, right.
But in any event, so look, I mean, this entire system has to be reformed. We need to focus on skills and knowledge. We need to be subsidizing things where there is a national need. That's not what the student loan program is. The student loan program, you can borrow money from any degree for any university, irrespective of whether or not it's a marketable degree, and irrespective of whether our economy needs those types of skills. The other thing is that the student loan program doesn't apply to things like, trade schools, right? I mean, we have a huge problem with regard to the trades. I mean, we ought to be, addressing that. In addition, if you want to give any relief to student loans, then you ought to give relief in exchange for service. There's no free lunch here. Okay. Oh, by the way, you can get relief if you go into the military, but we need to expand it far beyond the military, right? And not just to government. We have certain occupations. We have certain areas of the country. We have certain not-for-profit groups. So we can broaden the definition, okay, on when you get relief. But the idea that you're going to, quote unquote, forgive student loans, irrespective of the facts and circumstances, I think is mindless and wrong. I think it's illegal. I think it's inequitable. I think it's irresponsible. And by the way, do you know what the largest asset on the federal government's balance sheet is?
No.
Student loans.
You're kidding.
That is the number one asset on the balance sheet. So what are you going to give away next? The White House?
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe things would improve if they did.
Pardon me?
It
Maybe
wouldn't hurt if they did.
improve if they did.
Well, I was featured in a award-winning documentary back in 2007, 2008 called IOUSA, and the cover of the DVD and the beginning for the movie was a deteriorating White House with a foreclosure sign on the front of it. So
Yeah, I
It's-
think I've seen that.
Yeah. I saw the book IOUSA, but the thing is, it seems to me, David, the situation got worse, not better.
well, it has. No, it has gotten better, and it has got. So the answer is, look, the student loan program is badly broken. The answer is not to forgive the loans. All right, it's to reform the program and to potentially provide some release in exchange for approved service.
Yeah. At one time, the United States was energy. We were self-sufficient. As a matter of fact, I understood we had a glut of oil. Now the thing has changed. What has changed in this short period of time to make the United States basically more energy dependent as opposed to independent?
The policies of the current administration. Under the Trump administration, there was an express policy to make the United States energy independent, so that we would not be dependent upon others, including unstable regions of the world, and so that we would be able to actually help our allies reduce their dependency on providers like Russia, as an example. But the current administration is very, very anti fossil fuels and is very pro alternative energy. It's fine to be pro alternative energy. It's fine to recognize that we do have a climate change problem we got to come to grips with, but you also have to keep in mind you can't do it overnight. All right. And that, being energy independent not only is something that is desirable from the standpoint of economics and opportunity, it's also something that's desirable from the standpoint of national security. And so when you look, we all know in economics, one of the basic questions is supply and demand, right? So if you look at energy production in the United States at the end of 2019, which is before we got the big hit from COVID, which affected demand, obviously, right? We were producing 1.5 million barrels more of oil a day in 2019 than we are today. So production is down, supply is down, okay? But now we have increasing demand, right? Because we're recovering from COVID, so you've got increasing demand. And now we have a situation where globally, certain providers are being restricted on their ability to sell their production, Russia in particular, right? So that exacerbates the supply and demand problem. But it started with this administration's 180-degree turn on energy policy on day one that they took office. That's the beginning. Has, quote unquote, Putin's war had something to do with it? Yes, but a majority of the issue does not relate to Putin's war. And the facts bear that out.
The irony is that energy independence in the United States really gets us closer to alternate energy solutions faster than the lack of energy independence in the United States, because we have the resources to do it. By doing what we've done, we've essentially blackened our eye. And I think the reason it happened was because of AOC and their new Green Deal, which was insane to begin with. The whole idea of, like electric cars and that kind of thing are not a bad idea. They're not really great, but they're not sustainable right now. We don't have the infrastructure. They're basically a toy for the rich people to go around and make it look like they're, doing something good for the economy, when we know the battery technology and everything else actually makes it worse for the economy. It's really interesting. It's hypocritical. It's difficult, and it's creating a very big harm on the American people. It's a tax on the American people to keep this policy unchecked. We need energy independence so that the American people do not suffer, and the people around the world do not suffer because of the incompetence and poor decisions of this administration.
Well, the record high energy prices, but again, those are nominal dollars, not inflation adjusted dollars, okay, are biting on the pocketbooks of Americans. And that, and as we know, energy costs ripple throughout the economy.
Yes.
Energy costs ripple with regard to agricultural products. Energy costs ripple with regard to, commercial goods, because you have to get them from point A to point B. There's lots of things that are made out of depending on fossil fuels like plastics and and a variety of other things. And so, it has a significant ripple effect throughout the entire economy. So with energy prices being as high as they are, and other factors that are affecting inflation, which includes the supply chain problem, there's no question about that. Okay. And excessive federal spending and irresponsible Fed policies as well, then the American people are feeling it. They're feeling it. And I think they will let their views be known in November.
Right. Yeah. Oh, what really bothers me is the economic plan or lack thereof, David, because doesn't the United States government have a council of economic advisors? Don't they have smart guys like Ken Rogoff who work in this particular area? He's also a grandmaster chess player, but I've been trying to get him on our show. I'm working on this guy, and instead it looks like next week we'll have somebody from the Cato Institute, which I've heard about, but I've never talked to these people.
Well, they're smart people. They're libertarian. Are you going to have what, Dan Mitchell?
It's one of the general counsel. I'll have to get.
Yeah, well, Cato is libertarian.
Are they libertarian?
Yeah, they're libertarian. So
I'm just interested because I've heard of the Cato Institute, but I've never really interfaced with the Cato.
Yeah,
Institute.
I've had some interaction with them.
Did you ever interact with Ken Rogoff? He's some sort of economist, really?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, there is and has been for a number of years a Council of Economic Advisors.
Right.
All right. Underline the word advisors.
Right.
Okay. Whenever you're an advisor, it means that your opinion can be provided, but it may or may not be heard or heeded. Okay. Yeah. And the truth is, I don't know who's in charge of this current crew.
Well, that's a problem.
I know who's in charge legally. All right. I know who's supposed to be in charge, but it's not clear to me who really is in charge. Yeah. Because it's hard to have messed it up as bad as it's been messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, it really bothers me that there's no real economic plan, or at least I don't hear anything about an economic plan. Even this media company that we're doing, we actually had a plan several years ago. We're just executing on the plan. It's not.
Well, we've talked before about the fact that the United States has never since 1789 had a forward-looking threat, risk, opportunity, outcome-oriented, resource-constrained plan. Never. Now, the Defense Department, and I'm on the Defense Business Board, has the National Defense Strategy, which is informed by the National Security Strategy, and that's important, but it's only a piece of a very big puzzle. The Defense Department's about 50% of discretionary spending. Right. It's about 20% of overall spending, if you will. But for vast majority of government, we have no plan. Okay. And we talked about before, we're myopic. Mm-hmm. We go from crisis to crisis. We're in a reactive mode rather than a proactive mode. Yeah. And yet when we look in the world today, some of our biggest rivals, competitors, comparators, use whatever word you want. They do. The biggest one being China, and they're executing on them.
Right. Yeah, and that's the problem I have, because years ago when I got an MBA, I do remember one course. Now I'm going back like 40 years ago. they were saying that there's management by objective. They call it MBO. You create
MBO,
your
right.
objectives, your plans, you manage toward, or management by crisis. You wait till the crisis takes place and then you manage the crisis. And they kept saying that's not a good way to go. In other words, management by crisis. Instead, it's better managed by objectives. Outline your objectives and get to them. I don't see any objectives in management, at least certainly in the economic area. There's no management by objectives in terms of Social Security, Medicare, student debt, anything. But I do see management by crisis. We'll wait till the crisis takes place, then we're going to jump into it at this point in time. Is this, and aren't there smart people in Washington, D.C., or is this an intellectual and leadership vacuum?
Well,
I just don't get it.
Well, first in the private sector, 40 years ago it was MBOs. Today it's, KPIs or OKRs. But I mean, the whole idea is you have a plan.
Sure.
You're trying to achieve certain desired outcomes. You define what those objectives and outcomes are. You put them to the maximum extent possible in quantitative terms. All right. You communicate that throughout the entire organization. You align your information systems and your data analysis accordingly, and you link your performance measurement and reward systems to those, right? And things happen, right? Because in the private sector, if you don't do that, you're not going to optimize performance, and you could go out of business, right? I mean, you could go out of business, right? In the government, most of the people in government have no meaningful private sector experience. Most of them have no meaningful private sector experience. The government tends to, let's get the money, let's spend the money, let's measure things based upon outputs, not outcomes. In other words, how much money did we spend? How many regulations did we issue? How many enforcement actions did we take? But they're not linking back to, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? And how do we measure success? And how are we doing against plan? Are we getting better or worse? How do we compare our competitor or comparator groups? Now, in fairness, we did that at GAO. When I came to GAO in 1998, they had no plan. We developed the first plan, we implemented it in 2000, and we adopted every principle that I just told you, all right? And the result of that is a dramatic transformation, a dramatic improvement in return on investment, a dramatic improvement in employee satisfaction, a dramatic improvement in client satisfaction, right? And to the credit of my successor, who was my number 2, Gene Dodaro, who's now the Comptroller General, he's continued that, all right? But we institutionalized it, all right? The problem is that doesn't exist in an overwhelming majority of government. It just doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist on a consolidated basis, which should be done by the Office of Management and Budget on behalf of the President.
Really? And so they're not even doing that. Well, wouldn't that to me be more important than at least here in North Carolina, we have a Senate race and we have a congressional races going on. There's only 3 issues on the table. The only 3 that they're showing: abortion, immigration, and gun rights. Okay. And you're elected if you're for family values and you're either for or against abortion or for or against gun rights. Okay. Economically, 0. In other words, and some of the stuff that we're discussing, it's getting no press at all, at least on the inflation front, the GDP going down, Social Security going bankrupt. The people that are running for offices, in my humble opinion, have 0 experience in basic economics.
Well, part of the problem is right now you're in primary season, okay?
Right.
And in primary season, depending upon what state you're in, if it's a closed party primary, you have very low turnout, and the people who turn out are the zealots, disproportionately. By that, I mean, if you're in the Democratic Party, they tend to be people that are far to the left of the mainstream. And if you're in the Republican Party, they tend to be far to the right of the mainstream, all right? And so you have a minority of the minority deciding who the candidate's going to be running in the general election. And the issues that you just talked about, they're legitimate issues, okay, but they tend to be disproportionately a matter of concern to people on the extremes. A word that I use sometimes is wingnuts, okay? And at the same point in time, when you look at the general population and general polling, number one is the economy. Number two is inflation. Okay, I mean, those matter the most. Okay, abortion is 10%. 10% of the voters care about that. Now, is that going to energize the Democratic Party? Yeah, but not enough to overcome the first two.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to have to go because we've got another show coming up. We want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States, and Dan Worthington, former Associate Dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law. We'll see you next week on Economics Monday. Bye-bye.